Hey friends, it's Mike. It's been a while since I've done a guitar video, and I picked up this old Univox 335. I believe it was referred to as the Coily, C-O-I-L-Y, I believe. I picked it up off of Refurb.com, and I got it pretty cheap. I made an offer on it, and the seller accepted it, and the reason is because the guitar came as a shell. No electronics, no pickups, but the body is in very, very good shape. Now, one of the reasons why I was drawn to this guitar is because the original vibrato came with it, and I do have the spring, which goes over here. So I'll be putting that back on the guitar after I clean all this up. Also, it has the original bridge, and with these old Japanese guitars, it's very important to get the old bridges, because they are usually 9.5 to 7.25 inch radius fretboards. And obviously the bridges are designed to accommodate that type of radius. And this one has the original bridge. You can take a look at it. It's well made. Underneath they have the felt. And you don't see this anymore. There's a little sticker that says, hey, position the bridge here. Interesting. Now I'm going to put new pickups in the guitar, and here's the first problem that I ran into. The width of these pickup rings is very wide, much wider than what we see today. And trying to locate pickups, new pickups, to fit into this pickup ring, I found to be impossible. I couldn't find them. The old pickups that I did see on eBay looked really beat up, and of course the sellers were looking for a lot of money. So let me just compare these pickup rings that are on the guitar right now to what we see today. Okay, so the middle ring here is the size that we would see on guitars today. And as you can see, the rings that are on the guitar are much wider. Also, the cutout for the pickup itself is too wide. So I can't drop a humbucker in there. Maybe if I jerry-rigged it a little bit, I can get a P90 in there, but that's not what I wanted to do. So what I did is I found a guy on the internet, and I'll put his link down below in the description box, who makes custom pickup rings. And so what I did was I drew out a schematic with the specifications, length, width, height, and all that stuff. And of course it's got to be this wide so I can screw the pickup rings in. But what I did was I essentially overlaid this in my drawing so that I get this cutout with a pickup ring that is this wide. And so I received an email back from the gentleman this morning. His name is Dave, and he said not a problem. So that problem is fixed. I am going to put in humbucker P90s into the guitar. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a pre-wired Epiphone harness. I'm not going to go crazy with wiring it up myself. These pre-wired harnesses work great, so it's going to save time there. Again, like I said, I have to replace the frets. And we can take a look at the headstock, and what you'll notice is it has the old Gibson headstock. And if I had to date this guitar, I believe it to be the early 1970s, very early, maybe even the late 1960s. But she's in great shape. Take a look at the rest of the body here. Really no substantial blemishes, which is amazing for a guitar this old. If we take a look at the fretboard, we can see the binding comes up and over. You see right here? You don't see that today. So when I sand it, I'm going to have to be careful. I'm going to just lightly sand it, of course, after the frets come out. just to freshen it up a little. The only thing I did notice, and it's not a big deal, but there appears to be, I don't know if you can see this, there's a slight twist in the neck going down here. And with a guitar this old, you run the possibility of something like that happening. I've worked with guitars like this before, and that's a very minor twist in the neck, so I'm not going to worry about it. The guitar will play fine, and there won't be any issues. But again, for the price that I got it for, it's well worth it. I'm also going to put a pickguard back on it. At one time it had one, you can see here, and there's another hole here, so I'll do that as well. So what I'll do is, as I get through the work, I will do some video updates so you can see how she's coming along. But I thought it was a good thing to get the before pictures and the before video so that we can have the compare at the end of the project. Okay, that's it, over and out, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay, so today is fret day, and I pull the frets on the guitar. And when you pull the frets on any guitar, especially the old ones, take your time, go very, very slow. And what you're seeing in here is just grunge. And that's going to be taken care of when I lightly sand the fretboard. So how am I going to do that? This fretboard has a 7 1/4 inch radius. And so we're going to use a 7 1/4 inch radius sanding block. How do I know it's a 7 1/4 inch radius? You just take a radius tool and just place it on your fretboard. Okay, so this is a radius checking tool. And you can see it has a number of radiuses. If you take a look at the top there, hopefully you can see this. It says 7 1/4. Behind that, if we move that over, it'll say 9 1/2. And if we move that over, we have 10, and so on. So what you want to do is you want to take your radius tool on these old Japanese guitars, many of them, especially the really old ones like this one, this is about 50 years old. You take your radius tool and you place it down on the fretboard. And you can see there's no gaps. Now, if we try the 9 1/2 inch radius, sorry this is a little dark, but you see the sides? You should not have that gap. Sometimes there might be a very, very small gap, some sunlight might get in. Especially with old guitars, that'll happen because of the tooling that they had back in the day. It was not perfect. But with today's technology, the radius on the guitars are cut pretty much exact. But going back 30, 40, 50 years ago, it could be a little off. Okay, but not a big deal. So what I do is, this is double-sided carpet tape. And I will take a piece of this tape and I will line this part of the block, right? Because this is the block that's curved. And then I start with 150 grit sandpaper. Don't use sandpaper that's coarser than 150, because if you do, you're going to dig too much into the fretboard, into the rosewood. Okay, so start with 150. And once I do the 150, I'll move it up to 800, and then I'll finish up with 1000. Okay? And once we get that done, I'll start to lay in the frets. I got these frets from Philadelphia Luthier. You can see the 7.25. That's 7 1/4 inch radius. All right? So I'm going to start the process now of sanding it down. Once I finish it, I'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like. You'll see a fretboard that is very much cleaned up. Also, it will help take out some of the first and second fret wear from playing. You know, when you press down, you play your chords, strings are getting pushed into the rosewood, and sometimes you'll get, especially on old guitars that are played a lot, some divots. So we'll see how much of that will come out. Sometimes not all of it comes out, but you can minimize it. Okay, so I'll be right back after I finish the sanding. Okay, so I started the sanding process, and you can see what I did here. So the double-sided tape obviously is underneath the sandpaper. Again, 150 grit to start. And when you do this, just glide the block over lightly. Do not press into it, very lightly. And you can see that some parts of the neck are a little higher than others. And again, that has to do with the technology that they had back in the day 50 years ago. It wasn't perfect. Okay, so I'm going to sand it a little bit more with the 150, and then I'm going to make my way to 800 and then 1000, and she'll be very, very smooth and ready for the frets. I'll be back. Okay, so the frets are all installed, and I did sand the fretboard and spruced up the radius a little bit, which actually helped a lot to make sure that the frets sat nice and flush against the fretboard. Now you can see that there's still some wear in the fretboard from years of being played, and there's a kind of a little divot there. There's really not a whole lot you can do about that unless you want to take out the fretboard, swap it out, but that's something you don't want to do, especially with a guitar that's 50 years old. You want to retain as much of the natural build of the guitar as you possibly can. Now with the frets, they haven't been dressed yet, which means if you run your fingers across the edges, they are sharp. Okay, so they're going to grab your fingers. So I'm going to have to work on dressing them, and I'll do that today. And also I will level the frets. And once I do that, I'll put a new nut in, and I'll show you how I will radius the nut so that it conforms to the 7 1/4 inch radius on the fretboard. And then all I need to do is to wait for the pickup rings to come in. Remember, I had them custom made. The pickups are coming in also. They are humbucker size P90s, and then we'll put the electronics in. I was able to order some new vintage looking knobs, which will go nicely with this guitar. We will put the vibrato back on, and she'll be all set. She's going to look beautiful when she's finished. All right, so that's the update, and as soon as I finish the fretwork and dressing the frets, I'll come back and we'll take a look. Welcome back, friends. It's been a couple of weeks. I was waiting on the pickup rings to show up, and here's one of them. And I'll show you in a little bit how it compares to the original set of pickup rings that came with the guitar. But in the interim, what I did was I did all the fretwork, and she looks great. And I finished all of the fret dressing. So she feels great all the way down the neck. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to replace these old pickup rings. As I mentioned in the previous segment, these rings are extra wide, and not only are they extra wide, but the cutout for the pickup is too wide for a modern day humbucker pickup. So I located a shop on the internet, and I had these pickup rings custom made. And so what we have is the exact same width, except the pickup ring now has the smaller size cutout so that we can fit a modern day humbucker into the guitar. Okay, so if we overlay it again, we can see all of the holes match up, but now we can get a regular size pickup into the ring. So that's good news. The pickups I'm going to go with are from T&T Guitars, and they are humbucker size P90s. That's the bridge. And I thought that the pearl, the ivory pearl, would look great on the guitar. So I'm going to go with that. So it's going to have P90s in it. And the knobs I'm going to go with are these witch hat with the gold inlays here to give it the vintage look. Now these are brand new, but they look vintage. I tried looking for Univox 335 knobs on eBay, and they were difficult to find. And when I did find them, the seller was asking a lot of money for some old knobs, and I just wasn't going to go that route. The vibrato I will be putting back on the guitar. I'm going to clean it all up, polish it up. I also have to run a ground wire that has to go here, and that's got to run to the pot. What I did was I pre-wired a harness. So I put this all together, and we're going to go with this. All right, it's going to be fairly easy to get the harness in and the pickups in because the guitar is completely hollowed out. You're not going to be able to really see it, but trust me, there's nothing blocking anything in here, so it's going to be easy to work with. Also, the holes here for the potentiometers or the pots have to be widened a little bit. The stems on the original pots were obviously a little thinner, so if I try to get this pot in there, I don't know if you can see that, but it's not going in, so I just have to take my drill and widen the holes a little bit. When you do that, put a piece of painter's tape over the hole to keep the drill bit from chipping the finish, and start with a drill bit that is just slightly larger than the hole. Do not start with a drill bit that is much larger than the hole, because then you will chip the finish on the guitar. You've got to take your time and do that very slowly. Okay? So I'll be back in a little bit. I'm going to start putting the pickups in the new pickup rings, and I will wire up the guitar, and then we'll move to putting the vibrato back on, the bridge, stringing her up. I'm going to have to adjust the string height here at the nut, and then reshape the nut for a 7 1/4 inch radius. And I'll show you how I do that when we get to that point in the work. Okay, so I'll be back in a bit. Okay, so all of the electronics are in. All the wiring is complete. It took a while because with a hollow body, you don't have the hatches in the back of the guitar in order to reach the pots. So everything has got to be done through the F holes and also through the pickup holes. I cleaned up the vibrato. There was a lot of grime. It looks great now. I actually took the whole thing apart, including these screws here, WD-40 inside here, and also the same thing over here. There are ball joints in there to make sure that it moves up and down smoothly. The pickups are taped down right now because the pickup rings are not fastened to the body. And I won't fasten them to the body until after I get the bridge on and I run a low E and high E to make sure that I have the pickups aligned properly. The pole pieces are where they're supposed to be relative to the strings above the pickups. Okay, so she's looking real good. I have the arm taped down so that it doesn't flop around when I'm working with it. So she's coming along and it's looking real good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the bridge. You can see it has a lot of grime. This is how the vibrato itself was looking. Just 50 years of buildup. So I'll take it apart, clean her up, and then put it back together again, and I'll put the bridge on. And once I put the bridge on, I will run the low E and high E. We will align the pickups, and then once I have the pickups aligned, we'll screw them into the body, and we'll put the rest of the strings on, and then we'll do a setup. Okay, so she's coming out great. I'm really very pleased with how she's looking, and so let me get started now with the bridge. Okay, so the bridge has been cleaned up, and it's looking good. And you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that I'm running the low E and the high E strings off the tailpiece here on the vibrato. And so what I'm looking for is to make sure that the strings line up over the pickup poles, and most importantly, we want to make sure we have the proper amount of distance between the very edge of the fret here, or the fretboard, to the side of the low E string, and the same thing here, right here, here to here. And so that distance should be around 3 to 4 30 seconds. Can you see that? Off the side of the string. And we want to see the same thing on this side. So we see that it's around 4 30 seconds. Okay, that's a good rule of thumb. Now, one thing that I've noticed is the clearance at the 12th fret between the string and the fret is about 4/32 here, and that would be 2/16. We really want to get it down to about 2.5 to 3/32, so we've got to lower it. So why is it so high? Because we're taking a look at the bridge and we can see that the bridge is all the way down, so there's no adjustment down. It's as far as it can go, so that's not going to help us. The issue is here. Right now the nut slots are too high, so there's too much clearance right here, or gap between the fret and the bottom of the string. So I'm going to file the slots now, and so this slot here is going to go down and the string will sit deeper. Alright, so let me fool with the nut a little bit. I will deepen the slots. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. If what I'm talking about now is not making a lot of sense, it will in a moment. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, so what I've done here is you can see the slot is much deeper than it was. This has lowered the string and has closed the gap between the first fret and the bottom of the string here, the low E string. I did the same thing for the high E. So you can see, hopefully you can see that. The slot is a lot deeper. This closed the gap between the first fret, sorry for the blurriness there, okay, and the bottom of the string. By doing that, what you've done is you've lowered the string height in general throughout the entire fretboard, okay? So now when I measure the distance between the gap here, the bottom of the low E string to the top of the fret, the 12th fret, it's approximately 3 to 3.5/32 now. And the same thing here. Because this guitar is not a lead guitar, and it's not going to be used for lead guitar playing where you'd want the action lower, I'm going to be okay with slightly higher action on this hollow body. So whenever you do this type of work, especially on these old guitars, you're going to run into glitches, little things here or there, and nothing that can't be overcome. Oh, the other issue that I see right now, and I'm going to have to do the best I can, is when I press down on the last fret, you can see obviously the height between the bottom of the string and the top of the pickup is monstrous. So these pickups are going to have to go up very high. To get them up that high, what I'm going to have to do is, for those of you that are familiar with installing pickups, underneath these screws here are springs. I'm going to have to shorten that spring, which will allow me to raise the pickup higher than I normally would be able to raise it if the springs were not shortened. Okay? I'll show you that too when I get there. Okay, so let me take on that nut and I'll be back. Okay, so all of the slots in the nut have been lowered to the proper depth so that the gap between the bottom of the string and the first fret is where it's supposed to be. This ensures proper tuning also, the first and second fret when you play your open chords. So now I'm going to reshape the nut because I don't want the slots to be this deep. You could get string binding. So what I'm going to do is I have a radius block here. It is a 7 1/4. That's double-sided carpet tape that you see right there. And I'm going to attach 220 grit sandpaper. And we're going to reshape the nut so it conforms to the radius of the fretboard. And then the radius of the nut will obviously match the radius of the fretboard. So I'll be right back after I finish sanding and I'll show you the final result. Okay, so the nut now is much lower and the slots don't look nearly as deep. And I placed the strings in there before and it's looking pretty good. Also, what I'll do is I'll drop some lube in each of these slots to ensure that we don't get any binding. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to work on now is to ensure I can get the pickups at the proper height so that the pickups don't sit too far below the strings. Okay, so I'm going to cut to the chase and she's done. She came out great. I played her a bit upstairs. She sounds fantastic. The P90s really resonate with this guitar. She's staying in tune incredibly well. And again, this is a late 60s, 1970s Univox 335. I believe this is what they refer to as the coily. To recap, I got the guitar off of Refurb.com. I got it for a very good price, and the reason is because none of the electronics were in the guitar. It was hollowed out, there were no pickups, but it did have the original vibrato with the arm. The arm, if you go look, many times it's missing. So that's what piqued my interest the most with this guitar, that it had the original arm. It had the original bridge, which is very important because it is curved for a 7¼ inch radius, which is what the neck is, the fretboard. Everything as far as the original parts, like the bridge and the tailpiece, the body, were in excellent condition. Whoever had this guitar took very, very good care of it. Okay, so just to recap real quick, the things that I did. Brand new frets. I did refresh the radius with a 7¼ inch radius block, sanded it a little bit just to get some of the grime and wear and tear off the guitar after 50 years, and that little refresh worked great. The nut is brand new, and I did curve the nut so it is riding with the 7¼ inch radius. The truss rod cover is the original. The tuners are the original. Again, all the electronics are brand new because the guitar, as I mentioned, came in hollowed out. The pickups are P90s with the ivory insets. The pickup rings are custom made, you can see, because they're much wider than what we would see today. Back in the late 60s and early 70s when Univox was making these guitars, and other Japanese guitar makers also did the same thing. They had these wider pickup rings. Also, the pickups were wider. So the custom build on these pickup rings, and I'll put the link in the description box below. The total cost for the pickup rings was $40, and they're very well made, by the way. They're not this cheap plastic stuff that we see on virtually every guitar, including Gibson's. So part of the custom specs with the pickup rings was to make sure I can get a traditional modern day humbucker into the guitar, and the work that was done was absolutely excellent. Everything just fit and worked perfectly. The bridge was cleaned up, really in very nice shape. Again, here's the tailpiece. Here's the bar. Underneath the bar here, I added a little felt tip. See if you can see that, like you would get on a Bigsby. Really very, very nice. Very nice. A nice add to the collection. Anytime you can get a guitar this old, around 50 years old, and you can rebuild it or restore it back to its glory days, I mean, there's a lot of satisfaction with that. All right, let me flip her over. You can take a look at the back side of the guitar. Okay, you can see the original tuners are on the guitar. The neck is in excellent condition. No marks, scratches, or divots. Here's the back of the guitar. Really in fine shape. Very nice. And there you go. Made in Japan. A long time ago. Okay, everyone, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And what I'll do is I'll end this video with some stills and a cut from my new album, Hollow Moon. Alrighty, have a great day. Any questions, please leave a comment below. Bye now.